Good morning again, everybody. I am Dr. Lloyd Parks. I'm the Leadership Development and Institutional Strengthening Specialist with the Caribbean Center for Development Administration. Welcome once again. This is our third installment, the third of a four-part series, webinar series around the theme Citizen-Centered Service Excellence. We have been having an awesome time of learning and sharing and networking in the first two webinars that have gone on before. And we expect that today will certainly be no different. So, as usual, if you are accustomed to being part of our webinar series, you know it's a part of our continuous learning and development strategy here at CARICAD to allow for opportunities for us to continue to grow and develop and to share and to learn and to network across our stakeholders. And so we always like to remind persons what we need to do, what the ground rules are, so that we can have the best possible virtual learning experience. So, you want to close all the distractions, turn off your phones, mute them, maybe turn the ringer down. You want to close the other distractions in terms of other applications that might be open on your device. Remind your colleagues, this is a short learning period for you. And so that they could, give you that space. We ended another 1.5 hours approximately, so they can come back at that time. Bandwidth can be a challenge for us in our region, unfortunately. And so you want to have the best possible bandwidth. So to do that, plug in your internet cable if you have that ready and available. If you have a good working headset and microphone, and you want to, interact and engage in the session using that, then you want to ensure you have that plugged in if you have it. All right. And I see persons already saying in the chat room, good morning. Good morning, guys. Good morning. And we'd like to know where you're joining from. So I see that Solange is joining from Antigua and Barbuda. Welcome, Solange. Solange is an alumni from our leadership program in Antigua and Barbuda. Welcome. Patricia is so faithful in her attendance with us here from St. Lucia. And Patricia, if I am not mistaken, now I could either get myself in trouble, but I think, Patricia, you have attended the other two webinars in this particular webinar series. Yeah. And I'm curious, so Patricia says, yes. So Patricia, if I could trouble you a little bit, I wonder if you can unmute. Just tell me, how have you found the webinar so far? So Patricia, I don't know if you can unmute. If you can't, that's okay. Yes, I see you unmuted there. Yes, go ahead, Patricia. And while Patricia is getting her microphone sorted, there are others joining. So it's Daniel Knight. And Daniel too. I've had the awesome privilege of interacting with Daniel in other workshops that we've had. Julian from Jamaica, Adrian from Jamaica. Yes. Let's see, Miguel from Antigua, Trinity to the bone nonetheless. Michelle from Trinidad. Great to have you. Marsha. Hi, Marsha. Also, Marsha, I believe you're an alumni from our Leading Change and Transition workshop. Marsha, Auditor General from Montserrat. Welcome. Georgia, also from our alumni from Jamaica, but Trinity to the bone. Simone from BVI, welcome. I think, Simone, you did our Introduction to Leadership workshops. Rhea from Barbados, Cindy from Antigua and Barbuda, also an alumni. Yes. No problem, Patricia. I'm seeing that your microphone isn't quite working. That's fine. But you said already that, it's great. Janine from Belize, welcome. Agnes also from beautiful. She says beautiful BVI. Yes, I've been there and trust me, it is beautiful. It really, really is. Luan just completed our April intake of our Leading Change workshop. She's the head of director of training and development for the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Welcome again, Luan. Welcome, Luan. And Luan, I do believe that you have been to the other, at least one or two of the other webinars that we have done in this Service Excellence series. And so, Luan, if I could trouble you a little bit and just ask you to unmute and just share what have been some of your takeaways from the webinar series so far?
Oh yes, my mic is on. Yes. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Dr. Parks. Coming into the training division, you know, just only last year, but it has really been a learning experience. That series we had on the change initiative really been a learning experience. I have benefited from being able to get an idea as to what goes on, you know, in other countries and so on. So it is really a learning experience. So any opportunity I have to avail myself, last week's the St. Lucia digitization process that they have going on there, any opportunity to learn is, you know, an opportunity well taken. So for me, that has been the most valuable experiences. Is the opportunity to learn and in ways that I can help my department to grow.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Luan. And trust me, you're going to be learning even more today. I see some others are joining us. David Knight from Jamaica. David has known me a long time. Welcome, David. He is the head of HR at the Jamaica Information Service. Patricia says that she has found the webinar so far to be informative, interesting, and it is piquing her curiosity. Indeed, I like that. I like that. I want to welcome also my colleague, Trudy Waterman, who has joined us, and of course, always with us on our webinars in the background working. Raphael Grease, also my colleague. Emma, I see your good morning. Good morning. Emma is the Director of Public Sector Reform in St. Vincent and the Grenadines as well. So I know that Emma is here, you know, with all our senses, you know, heightened to get all that she can. Jacqueline, welcome. Meredith, welcome. Welcome. And may I say a very special welcome to the Deputy Governor, Government of Montserrat, Lyndall Simpson. Welcome, DG. DG couldn't join us last week. She was so sorry, but I'm sure she has watched the video. So everybody, you know that we are recording live and we're live streaming on our YouTube channel. All right, so you can invite others to join us. Just go to Caribbean Center for Development Administration. Just look for that in YouTube. Join our YouTube channel. Also, I see Joseph Irish here as well, also from the government of Montserrat. Cleveland from St. Lucia. Welcome, Cleveland. All right. So today we are again continuing this business of looking at citizen-centered service excellence. And we're particularly looking at how can we use digitization to achieve service excellence. Last week, we looked at a range of public, transactions that had been digitized in the government of St. Lucia. Today, we are zeroing in on digitization in education. How can we use digitization in education to improve access, quality, etc.? And we are going to be looking specifically at lessons from one of our member states, Guyana. And before I introduce our speaker, I am curious because digitization in education is something that I do believe that we have all been experiencing in some way, form, or shape. I know certainly for many of you, this is now the method that you were using to access learning and development. Some of you may have been yourselves been students at universities or other colleges doing online learning. Many of you, I believe, were parents or guardians. Maybe you had your own children, nieces, nephews. For me, it was my neighbor's children, yeah? And so we were thrust into this business of online learning, right? And so I am curious if you could share in the chat. You could also just raise your hand if you wish to just share what has been your experience with this business of online learning. Has it been good? Has it been bad? Has it been mixed? What is the greatest benefit? What's the greatest challenge that you experienced, or your children experienced, or people in your world experienced with this business of online learning? So I am curious to hear about this. And I believe that just starting to share your experiences around this, it will lay the platform for our guest speaker, or continue to lay that platform for how he shares and some of the questions that might arise in the discussion segment. So let me give you another few minutes to just share in the chat. What has been your experience with online learning? So while I'm waiting for persons to gather their thoughts and to type up their responses in the chat, I could share ours here at CARICAD. Online learning was not new for us. But let me go back. Many of you will be aware of the Caribbean Leadership Project. This is a Canadian funded project focused on leadership development programming. And it ran for 8 years and ended in July 2019. Because many of you would have been participants in the leadership programming under that project. And one of the aims, the ultimate aim of that project was to create a sustainable leadership development program that would be, continue after the life of the project. Well, one of the things that we had to decide midway is the introduction of blended learning. And let me be honest with you, we were so resistant to it. They say the truth sets us free, right? We were extremely resistant to it. We felt it could have been done, da 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 da. And to her credit, the then director of the project director, kind of stood our ground and carried us along. And we learned how to do this kind of work virtually. And this then we got more comfortable with it. And then we recognized this was an opportunity to reduce the cost of learning delivery, rather than us going up, always going country to country to country, and that was an integral part of the business development model that CARICAD adopted when it took over the leadership programming from the Caribbean Leadership Project. And then lo and behold, we started the leadership programming under CARICAD banner fully in September 2019, doing a mix, some things virtually, some things going to countries, doing it face-to-face. And you know what happened in March 2020? Everything had to be done virtually not just our leadership development programming, but everything, including all the technical assistance projects that we undertake, etc. And guess what? We were able to do it. We're able to adapt. Not to say it was seamless, no. We had to figure out how do we communicate differently with our engaged clients, using the various applications to share and communicate. So, things like Share Drive, OneDrive, and whatnot, So that's what, but we found that people could still learn in the online environment. And in fact, because of the online environment, you have to, kind of stretch out the learning. It allowed for more opportunity for application in the real world context. So Cleveland, Patricia, all our educators experience has been face-to-face with all our professors up to this point. Yes, so it was quite a change, wasn't it, Patricia, to doing it virtually. Cleveland said it has been beneficial, especially where the users control over the time and content that is being learned. Yeah. Persons who are not so independent require guidance would have found it challenging, but it has its benefits. I must admit, I found doing as completely self-directed learning, I'm not saying that I am very good at it. I have to be honest, but certainly these kinds of synchronous kind of learning experiences, love them. Malika from Department of the Public Administration in Trinidad, welcome, also an alumni, says it has been mixed. There are pros or cons. Some of the pros, convenience and ease of working. Some of the cons, connectivity issues. Oh, yes. I mean, this is a major policy issue, I believe, for our governments in our region. How do we ensure that there is internet connection with the bandwidth strength that is needed right across our states? And the tools, to talk about the lack of tools necessary, yeah. So we have to have the tools. We also have to have consistent electricity supply. So Patricia goes on to say, however, in the workplace, I had to use online learning and her experience was good, I can assure you. She was in one of our online courses and Patricia was a great student. Lynette, hi Lynette. Lynette says online learning has had its benefits. Her children became more tech savvy. Their grades improved. She was able to listen in on the different teaching styles. At work, she has been able to access training that she never would have been able to due to the cost of travel. Oh yes, that's a benefit for sure. However, the challenges have been the children are getting tired of the platforms. Yes, unrealistic projects and at work, screen fatigue, disconnected learners not paying attention. Oh yes, all of those things are in the mix. All of those things are in the mix. So thank you all very much. And you've raised so many issues that I believe will be part and parcel of the presentation that you're about to hear with the Guyana experience. You've talked about increasing access, reducing costs, and what are some of the challenges, screen fatigue, knowing how to pace learning appropriately rather than, bombarding persons, your participants and students with too many projects. How do you keep your learners, your students connected? How do you get them to continue to be engaged and paying attention in the virtual space? Which is not to say that that particular challenge doesn't exist in the face-to-face. It does, but we can all appreciate that the dynamics are certainly different in the virtual learning space. Let me stop sharing here a bit. And so it is my delight to then introduce you to Mr. Marty de Souza. Now, Marty just completed our Leading Change workshop in January of this year. And I was completely fascinated by his particular change project that he worked on during the workshop. And overall, just the change and transformation through digitization that has been happening in the field of education in Guyana, okay? Marty is a transformational leader. He has had years of experience at varying levels in the field of education and has had remarkable breakthrough transformational success. And he has held many roles in the field of education, including that of principal. At the moment, he is Deputy Chief Education Officer, and he has particular responsibility for Amerindian and hinterland education development. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Marty to our webinar series. I invite you, while Marty is doing his presentation, you can post your questions in the chat. And at the end of his presentation, we are going to have a time of robust question, answers, and discussion. Marty, over to you, my friend.
Thank you very much, Dr. Parks, and it's so good to once again share a platform with you. I must say that I really enjoyed the training we did with CARICOM, the Leading Change workshop, CARICAD, the Leading Change workshop. It's a pleasure to be sharing with our colleagues across the length and breadth of the Caribbean. I was listening in on the countries from which our participants are from. And I realized that we do have a wide cross-section of professionals from a wide cross-section of countries across our nations in the Caribbean. So I will be sharing the Guyana's experience, as Dr. Parks would have indicated. So let me begin by sharing my screen. Let me see if I can get this on screen. Just a bit. Here we go. If someone can indicate. Yes, there we go. Very well. All right, so I will be sharing, as I said, the Guyana's experience with digital education in the hinterland of Guyana, the hinterland regions of Guyana. I'll be trying to keep in line with the theme, digitization, the overall innovation and transformation, improving educational access in Guyana's hinterland. So I will be taking you through where this innovation would have started, and we'll be looking at the successes, the challenges, and of course, what might be the possible future for digitization of education in Guyana, and more so across Guyana's hinterland. And so, let me just move the screen from blocking it. Right, here we go. So let me give you a little idea of what the challenge was. Well, I am certain that wherever you are from across the Caribbean, in fact, from across the world, we all would have been faced by the same challenge in March of 2020, more so in the Caribbean, when COVID-19 would have swooped down upon us, the scourge of COVID-19, causing us to do things differently. Many countries, including ours, were on lockdown, and education was so much affected. In March of 2020 in Guyana, there was a forced closure of all schools. Schools were closed for an extended period, that is for 8 months, until November of 2020, when there was a partial reopening, but only for the children of grade 10 and 11 across the country, that is from the coastland and in the hinterland. So we had that 8-month-long closure where no instruction, no face-to-face instruction, I must say, was happening. During those 8 months, during the period, a couple of things were happening or were attempting to happen. And one of it would have been online learning. Dr. Parks would have indicated, and I was seeing in the chat your experience with online learning. We would have started, well, Guyana would have gone online since schools were shut. It became the modus operandi for schools on the coastland. And even so, on the coastland, that would have been the modus operandi for schools that had access to internet on the coastland. In the hinterland of Guyana, however, and I will take you a little bit into taking a look at what is the difference, when I speak of the coastland and the hinterland, to give you a better idea as to what are some of the differences between these two geographic locations, geographic spaces in Guyana. So in the hinterland of Guyana, there are 14 secondary schools and what we consider to be 6 primary tops. Now, the primary tops are basically a continuation from grade 6 at the primary level, where there's no secondary school nearby, or in the event that a secondary school might be filled to capacity, cannot take in any more children from the primary schools. We have opened what we call a primary top, where the grade 7 children can transition into a secondary department, and they're exposed to a minimum number of subjects at CSEC. Also to note that these children who are in the primary tops would not have made the marks to attend one of the secondary schools. So they might have been given maybe a lower graded secondary school or the primary top from which they would have come, from the primary school from which they would have come. And so what happened in the hinterland is that the schools would have depended solely on printed materials, worksheets that were either prepared by the Ministry of Education centrally or by the schools and by the local schools from which the children would have attended. There was very little face-to-face interaction between teachers and students in the hinterland. So maybe the only kind of interaction would have been children coming to uplift worksheets, bringing worksheets to be marked, and that was as far as interaction would have gone. We will be focusing today on the initiative that would have happened in the hinterland of Guyana. So if you can see, well, you will see on the slide, there's a map of Guyana. Of course, you may know that we are on the South American continent, 83,000 square miles of landmass. The hinterland regions of Guyana are considered to be, if you can see at the top of the map there, Barima Waini. Just below that, there's Cayuni Mazaruni. Below Cayuni Mazaruni, there is Pataro Siparuni. And below Pataro, there is the Upper Takatu, Upper Essequibo region, which just borders Brazil. We have the two regions, Cayuni Mazaruni and Barima Waini, bordering Venezuela. So these regions, these administrative regions, are very, very remote. And so many of the infrastructure that you will find on the coastland, and you can see the coastland regions identified there that is closer to the sea, Essequibo Islands, there's Pomeroon, Supanam, and so on. Those are considered to be the coastland regions. And so to get an idea as to where the hinterland is and what happens in the hinterland, just a couple of pictures here to give you that, that indication. So the hinterland basically is made up of a lot of rivers, a lot of riverine areas. So on the left-hand side, you will see rivers with canoes and little huts at the side of the river. At the bottom of that, you will see some huts. And these huts are actually clay brick huts with thatch roof. These, you can find them in the deep south of Guyana, in the Upper Takatu, Upper Essequibo region, the region that borders Brazil. We have tons of land space, just vast land space with savannas and mountains. Really, really, really beautiful it is, I must say. And then we also have the rainforest. A lot of Guyana, probably, I can't tell you exactly, but maybe close to 90% of Guyana's landmass is still rainforest. So we have the land deforested highland regions. This one here on the right, you will see that huge benab. That is one of the indigenous tribes, the Amerindian tribes in Guyana. This is their meeting place. So their village would all assemble when there are public meetings or any activity. They will assemble in this huge benab, for that kind of activity. So this is basically what you will expect when you visit Guyana. You move out into the hinterland to visit to see what's happening. This is a little bit of what you will see and what you will experience when you get out into the hinterland. So back to digital education. Let me give you a little prelude as to where all of this digital education in the hinterland would have started. I would have spent quite a number of years working in these hinterland regions of Guyana, both as a classroom teacher, starting as a teacher, eventually running a secondary school, then as an education officer. In 2017, at a science fair that we held in Region 1, which is the Barima Waini region, we experimented with virtual learning. And this was in 2017, way before the pandemic, of course. What we did was we hid away a teacher in a classroom, in the same building that we were actually holding this science fair. There was an auditorium packed with with people, and they did not know where this teacher was teaching from. But what we did is that we actually video called on WhatsApp, and she was in this room, and we projected this image on a huge screen. And so the audience, they were amazed that this teacher could have been anywhere in Guyana. They did not know where she was. She could have been anywhere, and she was teaching a lesson. And so we could have actually seen her in real time, interacted with her even. And it was a big deal, because before that, not much virtual learning, virtual teaching learning was actually taking place in the hinterland of Guyana. And so we did not have Wi-Fi, and even now now it's catching on, but we did not have Wi-Fi in 2017 in some of these hinterland regions. What we did have was Digicel's data plan, and that is what we actually used to connect, to do a virtual experiment, or to experiment with a virtual lesson. And 4 years later, this is where we are. It would actually be tested nationally. And so to look at the innovation, to look at the actual the project that we ran across the hinterland. In November of 2020, a new position was created within the Ministry of Education, and that position was that of the Deputy Chief Education Officer, Amerindian and Hinterland Education Development, a position which I assumed at the same time in November of 2020. Now, COVID-19 has actually shown how disadvantaged the children in the hinterland regions are when it comes to education. And that would have increased the need to have an individual who would be focused on what is happening in the hinterland, on education in the hinterland, and how we can bridge that gap between the coastland and the hinterland. And so immediately when I assumed the position, I started to travel across the length and breadth of the hinterland, visiting the schools, talking to people in the community. Even though there was a lockdown, we tried to get into, at least communicate with the head teachers to find out, what was happening. And so what I found is that there are 19 schools in the hinterland regions of Guyana, secondary schools and the primary tops that I mentioned, who are writing CSEC. They're sitting the CSEC examination. 12 of the 19 would have been doing CSEC that very year. All right, and those 12 of the 19, had connectivity. So there was phone signal, there was Digicel's phone signal in the community, and they could communicate via WhatsApp. And the thing is, once WhatsApp, you can video call on WhatsApp. It means that we can Zoom. All right, we can Zoom, or we can Microsoft Teams, or we can do Google Classrooms, just that it was not tried. And so with this knowledge, a proposal was made to the ministry that, what we can do? We can actually beam extra lessons to the schools that had connectivity, because schools on the coastland, they were engaged in virtual learning, while schools in the hinterland, they weren't. And the children, especially the children in the grade 11, grade 10, grade 11, who are preparing for CSEC, all they had was the worksheets and the very little interaction that they might have had with the teachers. That's all they had for 8 months. And so we decided that, what we have to do here? We have to support the children who are preparing for CSEC in the hinterland. It was never before tried. And so at that stage, the ministry decided this is something that is very innovative, and I think we can get this done. And we started mobilization. We recruited virtual teachers. The virtual teachers that we got were specialists. We searched, we find some of the best teachers in Guyana in the 4 core areas of mathematics, English, social studies, and science. And, once we found those persons, we had to do an assessment, of course, of what are the needs in the schools in order to beam the lessons into the classroom and have live interaction between across schools. And we are bridging classrooms. We got those needs. We made a list of what the things are that we would need to provide, and we started to work. Generally, what I found was that before this initiative, before we actually brought this into play, when we heard of virtual learning, we tend to think about, fancy, high-tech, expensive equipment, expensive internet, a lot of bandwidth to deliver. But then I would have discussed with my superiors, and I said, no, man, it's not that difficult. We can do this if we keep it simple. And so the main challenge in making it work was, of course, figuring out how we can use Digicel's data and create a smart class kind of environment at every school that we can broadcast and that we can communicate with. Then, how could a teacher teach remotely from the coastland or wherever in Guyana we found that teacher? And every child would have access to that teacher without having their own individual device. And the answer was, we got to keep it simple. Fortunately, some of the secondary schools in the hinterland had a smart classroom, which was equipped with at least a smart board with cameras and in some sound system. Not all. For those where we did not have a smart room in existence, we simply used a laptop, which was placed strategically so that the webcam can pick up the entire class. The laptop was connected to a projector, or in the case where a smart board was available, connected to the smart board so that the images would be magnified. So you have this huge image, you can see the teacher as though they're really live in front of you. A mobile Bluetooth speaker acted both as a microphone and a speaker. Now imagine, a teacher is teaching and the child wants to ask a question. The child did not have to come to the front of the class to ask the question because we're only using one device. This mobile Bluetooth speaker, which also had a microphone, was moved around to the class, and that child, once a facilitator was manipulating or controlling the master computer, they can actually speak to the tutor. They can actually answer questions. And so that was the big idea. It was so simple. All of that having been put into place, it was a big deal on February 26th of 2021, where we had this massive launch. Media, the media was there, the Minister of Education herself giving the feature address. All the senior officers of the Ministry of Education were there for the launch because this was something special. This was never done ever before, bridging classrooms across the hinterland, where children can benefit from specialist teachers, some of them in Georgetown, some of them in another town in Linden. Some of you who might know the geography of Guyana know that Linden is a town on the highway, one of the highways in Guyana. We had we have teachers, specialist teachers from Berbice, one of the other coastline regions. And, it was special. It was a big activity on February 26th when we actually kicked off our virtual classes. And so here you will see, I'm presenting here on my screen, scenes of what actually transpired. So there you can get an idea what is happening. There's this child communicating with his teacher. He's using the camera. In this case, they didn't have a speaker to move around. I think this school had a speaker in the ceiling. So he had to come to the front of the computer, and they very creatively put a chair so that the computer can be strategic. The child can look into the camera, communicate with the teacher, and lessons were being done. Here are some other pictures of the classrooms across the hinterland. Some schools had smart boards, as I said. Others relied on a projector, which we provided for them. So you can see the top right corner, the children all spaced out, looking at the projector. And this one had a Bluetooth speaker that was moving around in the class. All right, so those are some scenes of what was happening in the classrooms, in the virtual classrooms. As a tutor, this is what he or she would have been seeing. So they're in front of their computer, they're teaching a lesson, and they're seeing the children because the webcam on the laptop would have been placed strategically, as I said, so they can actually pick up the children in the classroom. So if they wanted, they could have called to somebody in any one of the classrooms to answer a question. They might not have known them by name, but they can maybe identify the boy in, let us say this classroom is Marty Secondary, the boy with the orange mask sitting at the front, answer a question, and so they could have communicated like that. All right, so this is a screenshot from a lecturer or a teacher's screen. You can see here, this was a mathematics lesson being run virtually. And so this was a big screen, so the children would have been seeing this this setting. All right, so you can see it really, really, really interesting. Teachers would have used different apps to teach a lesson, different software they would have used. So it was not only content that they were delivering, but it was altogether a different methodology using a available technology. The program ran for, well, for that period until I think it was August, July, August period when CSEC would have been written in that year. So some of the successes. A project of this nature, it would have been difficult to actually tie down performance to this program or this project because there are many other factors, of course, which would have influenced how well a child performed. However, what we did have, what was a qualitative kind of analysis, feedback from the classes, feedback from the teachers, feedback from the community even. All right, so we have found that the 4 core subjects that we offered, students themselves would have related because we would have asked for feedback after the exams, how they felt that the virtual classes helped them. And at the Ministry of Education, we even compiled some videos based on the feedback from the children in the different hinterland regions. All right, so they would have attested that it was a great help to them. Parents would have attested that it was a great help to them. At one school in particular, at Kamwata Primary Top, there was an untrained teacher who was teaching mathematics at the grade 11 level. A number of the students in that school happened to excel in mathematics, and where they attributed it to the virtual lessons. Even the teacher himself would have admitted that he learned so much during the couple months that the specialist teacher was teaching. And of course, not just in the content that I said, but methodology as a teacher. He learned from this master teacher how to deliver a lesson using the technology. And that, of course, he would now use in his own classroom experience. The success coming out of this was that we had over 200 children who were able to connect via this platform online. 200 children across 12 secondary schools across the country, from hinterland regions, top of the map to down south of the map. Also, what we found is that the local teachers who had to act as facilitators on the ground, because they were there to ensure that the technology was working, they were there to unmute microphones for children, they were there to to coax children into responding or asking questions to ensure that they participate in the lessons. So those local teachers also benefited from the program. For them, it was a continuous professional development. They would have learned so much from it. Socially, it also bridged gaps across the hinterland. They were able to connect, classrooms were able to connect. So you had one type of culture in Region 1, sharing experience with what was happening in Region 9. So there was that interaction among students from across Guyana's hinterland. The virtual reinforcement lessons proved that it was possible that we can actually connect classrooms virtually. And what has it also done for us is that we have learned that, hey, if there is an absence or if there's a need for a mathematics teacher in one of our remote schools, we could simply connect that classroom to one of our top schools in Georgetown, and we can beam that lesson live into that classroom. So even though there might not be a teacher there, an actual subject teacher, there can still be continuity of learning. Another of the success was that this postland teacher, the experienced, the master teachers, for the first time, some of them were exposed to working with children from Guyana's remote regions, working with the Amerindian children in the hinterland. And in fact, one of the tutors, after this program would have concluded for that period that CSEC was now in writing, he came up to me and asked if it was possible that he can be transferred to one of these very schools in the hinterland regions. We made it possible. So right now he is serving in one of the deep hinterland regions in Guyana, offering a service, and he's really enjoying it. Whilst looking at your chat, I would have seen some of your feedback on what you think might be some of the challenges, or what was some of the challenges in your experience. And yes, we can relate to that. I can relate to that. We saw it happening here, right here with our virtual class. Unstable internet, That was one of our bugbears. Remember, we were not using Wi-Fi and the, you know, the big fancy connections, video, VSAT and those you know, whatever terms. I'm not very much tech, so I don't know what are the terms. But we use the data, and what we found is that maybe if it's raining, for example, the signal might not be too strong, so it might be buffering. Children might lose somewhat. But we had to find a way of making up. So even though if a class was bunks, for example, one of the schools who bunks, you know, the teachers would ensure that they send the presentation, they send the notes, and every child would have still gotten it. It was a duty now of the base class, or what we call the facilitator teacher, to ensure that the children in the home school was brought up to speed with what transpired during the lesson. Our failure. In the hinterland, as you would have seen in maybe all three of the pictures that I showed, you would not have seen any power lines, which means that in some of the villages, they had to rely solely on solar or a small generator for electricity. In the cases where it was raining, there was no electricity, so we had a challenge. Or maybe even in Georgetown, a teacher would have been teaching out here, and blackout, you know, power failure would have interrupted that lesson. So we had that kind of challenge. What we also found challenging somewhat, not in all cases, but it was a challenge nonetheless, the dedication of the local teachers or the facilitators on the ground in the classroom. Some of them had other commitments because these classes were run supplemental to what was happening in regular school time. So we asked that they remain, in some cases, up to an hour and a half after the regular school time to assist the children on the ground to ensure that they participate and ensure that there's engagement. For some persons, you know, they felt they were not compelled to do that. And so there was that challenge of ensuring that the dedication remained throughout the period. Because we were dealing with the hinterland regions, some of these children had to travel very, very far distances. And so when school would have concluded at 3 in the afternoon, our lessons would have run to 4, in some cases 4:30 we asked, but the children had to leave. Some of them were living very far, so some had to leave halfway through the lessons. Some could not even stay because they had too far to travel. In some remote areas, there was no connectivity. And as you would have seen, of the 19 schools, only 12 were able to connect for the virtual classes. And here's another one. Amazingly, some of the very teachers who were working with the children locally were not too au fait with the technology. So we were using the platform Microsoft Teams, and so we had to engage in some amount of training before they can actually come fully on board. So that was a challenge also. From that experience, we can now look into the future. Where are we heading? And what is it that is being done right now in Guyana? Given all the experience that we've had with COVID-19, given all the experience we've had with trying to ensure that there's continuity of learning, all the experience with the digitization of education, currently what is happening is that the government of Guyana is rolling out, having a rollout of Wi-Fi to all the hinterland regions. It is one of the goals of the Office of the President right now to ensure that every single Amerindian village has access to free Wi-Fi. That process is ongoing. In fact, last night, I got a WhatsApp message, a photograph of one of the very remote villages in Guyana, where persons were sitting around a hub and they were actually online. So that is something that we're looking forward to. Amerindian communities in the hinterland are also being equipped with solar energy. So there's a mass rollout of a solar energy project where villages would now have access to electricity, lights, and things to charge, ports to charge the phones and devices, and to be in communication with the outside world. At the Ministry of Education, we're on a drive to ensure that we increase the number of smart classrooms that are available in schools across Guyana. So we're bringing on board more schools. It is an expensive investment, but it's one that is really worth it. Quite recently also, we would have issued a memo asking all teachers to become trained. So we have a number of teachers in the system who are not qualified. And so we would have given them that deadline to ensure that you apply for a training program, that you upgrade yourself and become a trained, qualified teacher. So that is currently ongoing. So the whole issue, the challenge with teachers not being in tune with technology, education technology will be very big on our agenda, because that is the direction in which we want to be moving. And so, in conclusion, this innovation simply showed that it takes an idea. All it takes is an idea and the will to make a change. Nelson Mandela says, we can change the world and make it a better place. It is in your hands to make a difference. Digitization in education in Guyana is something that we have tried in our hinterland, and we know it can work. Of course, we have to improve in a lot of areas. We have to improve on the bandwidth strength, for example, and we're working towards that. But I'm certain that in a few years from now, some of the challenges that we experience currently will be a thing of the past. And so that brings me to the end of my presentation. And I am now open to any questions. Dr. Parks, thank you so much for having me. And I conclude here.
No, thank you so much. That was such a wonderful presentation. Very eye-opening, very enlightening, very encouraging. Really happy to see the progress. And Cleveland has a comment here in the chat that you are going to find just fantastic, Marty. Cleveland says, another unmentioned success was the fact that Guyana had available online a comprehensive curriculum and teaching plans for all grades. And so Cleveland, who was in St. Lucia, was able to access you guys' curriculum and teaching plans during our school outages to continue the homeschooling of their children.
Yes.
You know, and so when we talk about the possibility that this kind of virtual learning allows for collaboration, access to master teachers, subject matter experts, it's not just within Ghana, it's possible across countries, you know. And so, Marty, tell us a little bit about that aspect of, you know, your digitization and education transformation process.
Right. So one of the things that we had to snap up on right away is that we realized that we are running out of time. Are you hearing me?
Oh yes, we are hearing you loud and clear.
I had my screen hidden, so I couldn't see my microphone was on. Right. So we decided that, you know, we cannot continue along the mode of teaching a regular curriculum that would have lasted X number of weeks. We had to condense. And so what we did, we engaged in a rigorous process of consolidating the curriculum. So based on the Guyana's curriculum, it's a spiral curriculum. So it begins from one stage and moves on higher and more difficult as you go through the grades. But we also realize that there are areas that are integrated in other subject areas. So we can actually trim the curriculum and we can fit it into a 20-week curriculum. And so we did that across all grades. And we put our consolidated curriculum along with the teaching plans online. So no matter where you were in the country, and as my friend in St. Lucia, was it?
Yes.
Can access it. Anybody in the world can access it. And we found this, you know, we found in Canada, even in Canada, we had situations where Guyanese children who would have just before the pandemic, you know, visited Canada, couldn't come back. They were able to continue classes. We actually had situations where they're thanking the Ministry of Education for putting it there, and they continued online, you know, accessing printed resource materials, and you know, it's all there. It's all there. So digitization of education has gone beyond you know, a virtual interaction. We put it there. It's available to you. One of the other innovation that I did not mention is that of the Guyana Learning Channel. So we realized that across the hinterland, there were homes that had access to direct TV, homes that have had access to cable television through satellite. And so the Ministry of Education would have invested huge sums in expanding the Guyana Learning Channel, which was a TV channel. So we included 6 channels. So a child in a nursery could log in, could put on the television in their home And there was the nursery program running from 8:30 to 12 o'clock. And the child can be sitting at home and engage in learning through the television, through cable TV. And so this happened across the levels. That was another way in which we had to be innovative. And we brought through digital technology, we brought the lessons into the homes of the children. Radio was another one. We expanded in our FM radio. However, that took a little longer because of the infrastructure to establish. But right now, we are rolling out FM radio stations in all the hinterland regions. So if a child doesn't have a TV in their home, they have a little radio, they can turn on the radio and still engage in learning. All right, so we tried as much as possible. We thought about all the possibilities, and we had to invest quite a lot. So there's not just one mode. There are many, many different modes that children can access education through the pandemic.
Thank you. There is another question here from Daniel, and Daniel is asking, is there a learning management system that is being used? And if so, how was it something that you purchased, or was it developed in-house in the ministry or within the government of Ghana?
Nationally, we provided all the information. We did not go digital in terms of creating a management system, education management system per se, where children can log in and track the progress. So basically what we did, we supported what already existed, because we realized that even though we want to go digital, children will be challenged by lack of access to devices. All right, so we realized that even if, in fact, we thought about doing this, and one of our funding agencies were in the process of developing a software that we can actually use in their home, and a child can interact with it. But we had to shelve that because of several other issues. Funding, it was very expensive, and access, the amount of money we would invest in it, how many children would actually benefit. So what we did, we used our consolidated curriculum that was online. We trained our teachers on how to use it, and we monitored, that was important, how the consolidated curriculum was rolled out across all schools in Guyana, because it was something that could be used in the classroom. It was a 20-week curriculum, and so we can actually monitor. At the end of the 4th week, we should be at this pace. And so the regions themselves would monitor and feedback the central ministry on how we are going. So it was very basic. It was very, very basic, nothing too difficult that anyone could, could manage. And it is something we're still working, even though we're back into the classrooms fully. We are still working with a consolidated curriculum until we feel that the learning loss has been recovered and we can actually move back into the bigger curriculum.
Thank you, Marty. And there are lots of commendations in the chat talking about the great work you're doing. Thanks for the information and congratulations on the work, the excellent work in education that you have been doing. Here's another question here in the chat. Wait a minute, I don't want to miss any. So give me a second here. Michelle is asking, just give me a second there, let me just scroll down. Is there a web address to access the curriculum online? And so perhaps you could type that in the chat so that everybody can access that. And I'll just go on to the other question from Melissa. She says, she notes the challenges and the successes, but can you disclose if there were challenges with absenteeism and parental support as it relates to the CSEC students?
Really good question. We did not find much of absenteeism because the parents actually were excited over this. The very few that could not be part of the lessons were those, as I mentioned, who were living very, very far. And if you could recall what the geography of the hinterland based on the pictures, children would have had to walk, in some cases, for 2 hours to get to school in the morning and 2 hours afternoon to get back. So at the end of the day, they have to ensure they reach home before it's night. And so the parents were dedicated, the children were dedicated, just that because of the situation, they could not be part of the class. We had also had other challenges in that some children, we've had dropouts. To say we had dropouts from the system, children would have registered to write the CSEC exam. The pandemic came, and we just simply could not find them. We could not find them. In some cases, they moved with their parents to another location. In the hinterland of Guyana, a lot of mining takes place. So some of them would have, during that 8-month period, they would have gone to the mines. Maybe the 17, 18-year-olds, the boys would have gone to the mines, and they would have found that they can make $1 million in 2 weeks on gold mining. Why come back to school? And so we've lost a number of our children. During that 8 months, a lot can happen during 8 months. We've also had cases where migration would have taken place. So children left, children migrated across a village, that there was that inter-village migration, left from one place to the next, never come back. In some cases, they just fell off the map. When I say fell off the map, no one knew where they were. Remember, we were all in lockdown. So when somebody just goes somewhere, nobody knows where they're going. And so we had that challenge, indeed.
Yes, indeed, indeed. So everyone, we can still post our questions in the chat, or you could raise your hand and we will acknowledge you. Here's a question that I have for you, Marty.
Mm-hmm.
I am curious about how did you guys work on the mindset shift? Okay, it does take a mindset shift to pivot in the way that you did, to be, so many people had to change their mindset towards how do we access learning and development? The teachers, the subject matter experts, the students themselves, the teachers who were, facilitators on the ground, the parents. How did you manage that aspect of the change?
It was challenging at first, but it took the bigger picture. It took me a lot of time, in fact, to get the bigger picture over to everyone, all the stakeholders. I found that it was challenging to convince the stakeholders right here, our local stakeholders, my seniors, that this thing can actually work. In fact, at one time, they asked me to present a budget for all of this. When I presented a budget of the things that, well, they thought would be needed, smart televisions, laptops, and a whole host, it was very, very, very expensive. They were willing to fund it, actually. We had to buy projectors and laptops and smartphones and so, but it was expensive. But that was the mindset of the folks who thought that virtual learning, you had to have all these fancy equipment to do virtual learning. But I presented that, but deep down inside, I knew that this year I can do this. If it cost me $20 million to present this, when I present this paper, it's $20 million. I can do this with 500,000. And that's what I did. I showed them that, hey, we cannot wait for cabinet to approve this amount of money. Then we have to go through the whole process of procuring X number of capital items. It's going to be too long, and the children will be suffering. Exam would be upon us, and we will still be waiting. And so I said, here, put a hold on that. Let me work my magic. Let me do what I know. And I shared the experience with them with the virtual learning we had in 2017, and it worked. And they were skeptical. They were skeptical, thinking that how can this thing work? With that little internet dongle that I had on one of the slides, that is what is going to power all of this. A simple dongle to bridge classrooms. And so the mindset, it was changed when we launched that day. Actually, that is when many non-believers were converts. When we launched that day, and children were performing cultural activities in their own school. And we at Central Ministry were actually sitting in our office, looking at the computer screen and seeing a child do a dance, in their school, whereby it was never done before. Nobody would have sit in their office and seen a school down in deep south of Guyana, virtually, and the child is performing a dance to the whole world. So we got the converts there. The teachers on the ground, the local teachers on the ground, good luck for me. I would have visited many of these schools before and listen to their concerns, listen to their thoughts on what they think we can do to improve. So actually, I secretly sold the idea to them even before I told them what we're going to do. So I asked them, what if we provide projectors? What if we provide videos? What do you think? And so they started thinking along that virtual line. So when I threw the idea out, they were all like, ah, this is something that I think can work. Right. So I had to work a backward approach, like it's them taking ownership. They had to take ownership of it. If I had just thrown it out to them and said, this is what we're going to do, it might have been a failure. But I worked through them. They accepted it as part of them, and they came on board. Even those who were not too tech savvy, and that was one of the challenges that I encountered. But they would have asked, we need some more time to train. Can you show me how to get this done? My MIS team at Central Ministry was very, very helpful. They're very patient, and they worked with the teachers who needed the extra help. So the teachers got on board. The parents, I had full support. The parents, because what we did, we asked the school to send a letter. Every school must send a local letter to the parent of every child that this is what is going to happen, and that this was going to be a pioneer project. So their child was going to be part of history, the first group to be engaged in virtual learning. We got him on board, and that basically the approach, and the results showed that it worked.
Okay, great. What you're hearing there, folks, that is stakeholder engagement at its finest. So Solange has a question in the chat. Do you think that the use of the consolidated curricula will be discontinued? Is there any way to compare the effectiveness of the consolidated curricula versus the use of the expanded curriculum?
All right. We do not yet foresee for how long we will work with the consult curriculum, because remember, COVID-19 is still on the horizon. So we do not want to at this time say we will work with this until this group of children transition to the other grade that we will start. We are still testing the waters. Right? We're testing the waters. Even though we have fully reopened schools, we are still using the consolidated curriculum. Every grade that transitions will be using the consolidated curriculum. We're looking at things. We're looking at the global picture. How is the COVID-19 pandemic still affecting us? So if it is a need for another closure, if there's a need for another closure, then at least we will know how to proceed. We will know what to do. We already have that consolidated curriculum. But I can tell you that we will get back eventually to the broad curriculum, but we cannot put a timeline to that as yet. Maybe within another, let's say, 3 years, COVID-19 out of the way, hopefully, we can transition back, ease back into our rollout of the broad curriculum. But that remains to be seen. We have not shelved the curriculum, the main curriculum. It is still something that we have in the back burner. And as soon as the opportunity presents itself, we will, of course, get back into using that. But even then, COVID-19 has really proved to be a scourge, and at the same time, something good. Good in terms of Guyana was actually moving to a renewed curriculum, a curriculum that was rewritten, whereby all the standards would have changed. So even after this phase is over, we will not be returning to the old curriculum. We will be moving to a renewed curriculum, which will, by the time we get back, they would include topics like COVID-19. How do we treat with pandemics in social studies? So we're moving to a renewed curriculum. So once the consult curriculum would have had its usage, we transition back to a full curriculum. It will be a renewed curriculum and not the old curriculum that we used prior to 2019.
Indeed. Julian is asking, how well did the students perform in their CSEC subjects in 2021? And I'm assuming she's talking about persons who would have participated in this project.
Right. The performance was average, was normal. There was no drop in performance, and there was no massive increase in performance. And that is why I would have indicated that the nature of this exercise, it was very difficult to actually prove or to link our virtual lessons with the performance of the children, because there are other several factors there. Children might have had access, might have done their own private work. So even though school was not in session, children might have done, a lot of work by themselves, self-motivated. And so we could not actually tie it in. What we could do was we could talk to the children, qualitatively get an idea, how did this benefit you? What did you take away from this experience? And so from that, we got a feedback that it was impactful. But in terms of tying down the results, so this initiative was something that we just couldn't, we just couldn't do. The feedback was enough for us in that, hey, this worked, and this is something that we can continue to do, engage the children with specialist teachers, and it is here to stay, it's here to stay. We know it works, and we can continue to do this.
All right. Fantastic, fantastic. So just checking for any other questions in the chat. I am not seeing any. And so let me ask you then, Marty, what would be your parting thoughts that you would like to leave with our attendees here today on this process of digitization and transformation in education?
My parting thoughts would be, don't hold back. Don't hold back. I mean, this is a time for COVID-19 has opened our eyes to change. And if we are afraid to test the waters, then we will remain in our little cocoons. If we decide that, this is something that, as the saying goes, where there's a will, there's a way. Try things differently. Something must work. If we do things traditionally, from time to time, we keep doing the same things over and over, it becomes repetitive. We might lose focus. But if we step beyond our comfort zone, think outside of the box, do things differently, we will find that, hey, things can actually work, and we can get results. So I just want to encourage our folks online to work towards a change. If things are happening one way and you're not getting the results, step outside, test the waters, go beyond what you usually do, and you will find that you can make a difference.
All right. Thank you, Marty. Now, I know I said it was your parting thought, but there is a question that has just come in, and we can allow you to respond to that. And I also ask that you could allow, you can stop sharing your screen in the meantime so that I could share mine. And so Melissa is asking, during the pandemic, a lot of teachers were already demotivated. So what were some of the strategies that you used to motivate teachers during the pandemic?
Interesting question. One of the things that we did not do in Guyana, even though schools were closed for that extended period, there were months when teachers were all in their homes. What we did not do is to cease paying our teachers. That's for one. So in the comfort of their home, hiding from COVID-19, the children suffering because they could not interact. Teachers were still paid the full salaries. So it was a self-conscious start, first of all, knowing that, I am in the comfort of my home, I'm safe, but I'll still be paid my full salary. It's almost as though I'm on leave for 8 months, in some cases, for some teachers who just were afraid to come out and pay the full salary. We had a call. It was basically a conscious call, or a conscience call, I should say, where we realized that children were losing so much. They were losing so much. And the only people that can make the difference would have been the teachers. And so we had a really big campaign for teachers to get back into the classrooms. Of course, the politics of it all, with the teachers union versus the Ministry of Education, we are calling for school teachers to get back into the classrooms. The union saying it is not safe. They want an extended closure of school. And so, we had that clash. But what we found is that the majority of teachers wanted to actually come back and interact with the children, because even though many of them were engaged online with their children, they found that they were not really getting anywhere. Children would simply be online, turn off the camera, not be in class, they don't know. And so it was frustrating. So even though the teachers were working, they decided that here it is better to come back to the classroom in a safe kind of environment to get back out and work. Teachers that were skeptical of getting back into the classroom, we had to convince them that it was going to be safe. And how could we do that? By providing the materials to ensure you're safe. So what we tried to do nationally is to ensure that every single teacher across the length and breadth of Guyana received a care package. And a care package basically involved their PPEs, face masks, hand sanitizer, detergents. We even provided multivitamins so they can boost their immune system. And so they did not have to expend, to get these resources. And so that in itself was also a motivating factor that here we have a Ministry of Education that's looking out for us. We have these resources, we can get back safely into the classroom. Infrastructurally also, we had to ensure that all schools, as much as possible, were provided with adequate hand washing facilities, with adequate detergents. And so given that kind of support, teachers eventually came back on board, got into the classrooms, and now they are out, they're fully out. So that was my response to that.
All righty, thank you so much, Marty. We are indeed so grateful that you took the time out to share these invaluable experiences and lessons. And we are looking forward, because the journey is not yet over. We are looking forward to getting an update on the progress that's being made in the area of education transformation in Guyana. Thank you so very much. And you'd have seen in the chat, the comments, just people just saying this is an excellent, and just thanking you from the bottom of our hearts.
Thank you so much, Dr. Parks. I will put the link to the Ministry of Education's resources in the chat, and then I will take my leave. Thank you so much for having me. Do have a good day all.
You too. And folks, we will send out a copy of the slides to all persons who have registered for our webinar. And so next week is the final in our Citizen-Centered Service Excellence webinar series. And we are going to be having that next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Caribbean time. And the topic will be implementing a user-centered approach to digitization of public services. And we will be graced with the facilitation of our esteemed alumni, Dr. Germain Joël Jean-Pierre from the Commonwealth of Dominica, a transformational leader in her own right, award-winning innovator, and has done excellent work in Dominica and across the region around digitization, and knows a thing or two about how do we ensure that we have a user-centered approach when we are seeking to digitize our public services. So please do log in for that. You can invite others to register. They can also watch live or delayed via our YouTube channel. And we have opened now our call for applications for our mid-level leadership development program. If you want to learn more, email us at info@caricad.net, or you can visit our website where you can access the call and the application form itself. This mid-level leadership development program is targeted, as the name suggests, at mid-level leaders, equipping you with the skills to lead self, lead other teams, and leading for citizen-centered service. And a lot of the skills that we talk about here, in this webinar, not only about citizen-centered service, about things around stakeholder engagement in the process and motivating, stakeholders and other team members around change. These are just some of the topics that are covered and some of the areas in which you'll be equipped to add value, not only to your own leadership, but to your organization. So thank you all very, very much. I will invite my colleague to now launch the poll. We want to hear